that the fate of Holland and Belgium, like that of Poland, Czechoslovakia and Austria, will be decided by the victory of the British Empire and the French Republic. If we are conquered, all will be enslaved, and the United States will be left single-handed to guard the rights of men.
During the late 1930s, Nazi Germany rapidly conquered nation after nation in Europe. After the tragic fall of Poland and Czechoslovakia in 1939, Germany invaded Belgium, Netherlands, and France on May 10, 1940. On the same day, due to the failure of Chamberlain's appeasement policy, Churchill was thrust into the spotlight as the new British Prime Minister. However, the Conservative Party questioned his capacity as a wartime leader. As Viscount John Davidson once said, in the House of Lords, Neville Chamberlain's name was received with a full-throated cheer, whereas Winston's name was received in silence. In May 1940, the French government informed Churchill of its decision to surrender to Germany, which led Britain into fear and danger as it was tragically isolated in its struggle against Hitler. Even though Churchill was already Prime Minister, war decisions are left up to a special committee known as the War Cabinet, which consisted of 5 members. The cabinet was called to discuss the dire circumstances of the advancing Nazi power. From May 24 to May 28, 1940, the War Cabinet considered the 3 perspectives of Churchill, Chamberlain, and Halifax. First is Churchill's perspective. As a new Prime Minister, Churchill was fully opposed to further capitulation to Germany. He passionately argued that surrender would mean the end of British liberty and democracy. Churchill believed Germany's triumph in the European continent would cause the expansion of fascist power. Additionally, Churchill argued that decent surrender terms to France did not mean the same terms be offered to Britain. Lastly, he believed that France's surrender would strengthen the British morale, as triumphantly presented in his speech in June 1940.
We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Next is Chamberlain's perspective. Chamberlain, the former Prime Minister and Lord President of the Council, believed ardently in peace. As Britain's leader, his primary goal was to maintain the peace in Europe. He believed the best solution to Germany's belligerence was to appease and meet its demands, as demonstrated in the Munich Agreement on September 29, 1938. After Chamberlain's return from Germany, he triumphantly announced to the public, "My good friends, for the second time in our history, a British Prime Minister has returned from Germany bringing peace with honor. I believe it is peace for our time." Secondly, he believed all leaders to be rational beings, but this led to his misunderstanding of Hitler. Lastly, he used estimated casualties as supporting evidence for his proposed negotiations. Third is Halifax's perspective. As the foreign minister, he believed in negotiated peace to prevent the possibility of German invasion. Rather than considering the estimated casualties for the battle, Halifax made his decision out of fear. He proposed his suggested approach to Italy in order to negotiate with Germany through Italy as a mediator. Martin Gilbert, Churchill's official biographer, described Halifax as,
in other words, that he was wanting to negotiate through Mussolini, not in order to obtain some German settlement with France which would leave France as an independent neutral country, but that he wanted to negotiate with Mussolini because he was frightened. He didn't want to stand up to the threat of Nazism.
On May 26, 1940, 3 days into the War Cabinet meetings, after a series of persuasive debates, including Churchill and the leaders in the Labour Party, Chamberlain was finally convinced to fight the Germans. Churchill told him that the terms offered by Germany would not be so different even if Britain were defeated after brutal fighting. Even then, Halifax still deeply believed the best solution to the current circumstances was to accept the terms offered by the Nazis, which would preserve British resources and minimize the potential casualties. He also knew these terms meant that the British government would come under the subordination of Hitler. In the meetings, the Chiefs of Staff issued a document entitled British Strategy in Certain Eventuality, which predicted the worst possible tragic outcome under the circumstance that France abdicated from the war. They believed Germany's economy was plagued by a shortage of materials and it could be defeated with the combined efforts of the Air Force and revolts from the occupied countries. However, their prediction was proven wrong. On the same day, Churchill ordered the evacuation of Dunkirk. He himself did not think more than 50,000 troops could be brought back safely. Nonetheless, the next day, many thousands more triumphantly returned to England, which strengthened the public morale as well as Churchill's perspective. On May 28, 1940, the war cabinet under Churchill's leadership decided not to give in to Nazi Germany and agreed to fight against Hitler's tyranny. On June 18, 1940, Churchill gave one of his most triumphant speeches, of which the prominent World War II historian Martin Gilbert states.
And I think that was what gave the British public, that's your question, what gave them their strength. And that's why when Churchill spoke in the House of Commons on the 18th of June, he began his remarks with the phrase, "The Battle of France is over. I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon it depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions." In other words, now it's us. And he also used a phrase. He said, Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war.
After 5 months of tragic firebombing and air raids, on October 31st, 1940, the Battle of Britain ended because the Germans could not break through the British defenses. After grueling days of constant attack with no gain, Hitler decided to change tactics. Churchill and the rest of Britain had successfully been the first to stop the German forces. Though the air was filled with celebration, all that was left in parts of London was rubble. The people had endured horrid days and tragic nights, causing many to lose their lives. While Churchill's public approval rose quickly following his inspirational speeches, he understood the tragic consequences of fighting Nazi Germany. The Battle of Britain itself involved numerous military casualties along with some 27,000 civilian deaths and 32,000 wounded by the constant bombings during the war. Following the battle, the British economy was severely weakened and would not be restored for nearly 20 years. Additionally, the life of every citizen was very difficult during World War II, enduring the German bombings as well as experiencing another young generation shipped off in war. Being British during this time was difficult, and had the United States and Russia stepped in any later, Britain probably would have been defeated. Amongst the clouds of death, sorrow, and tragedy, the British triumphantly responded to the unwavering commitment of Winston Churchill to stand up against the evil forces of Nazism in order to protect the liberties of mankind. Throughout the Battle of Britain, the morale of the people increased dramatically as the Nazis could not break the national pride. After Hitler discovered that he could not break the British heart, he quickly withdrew his men and attacked the Russians. This tactical error eventually led to his fatal flaw, a two-front war. It was the turning point of the war as Russia and the United States triumphantly joined Britain in the fight. If Churchill had succumbed to Germany in the sea of tragedy, the war could have ended up vastly different. Churchill was the man who did not lose the war and triumphantly saved the world from the dark depths of Nazism. Because Churchill's decision led to triumph, he helped secure democracy and liberty for Britain and for the rest of the world. As John Lukács, the author of 5 Days in London, stated,
Britain did not win the Second World War, the United States won it and Russia won it, but Churchill was the man who did not lose it. You see, Hitler came very, very close to winning the war in 1940. There was only one man who stood in his way, Churchill.
We have victory. A remarkable and definite victory. A bright gleam has caught the helmets of our soldiers and warmed and cheered all our hearts. The late Monsieur Venezuela observed that in all our wars, England, he ought to have said Britain, of course, England always wins one battle, the last.